Welcome to the final session of FE Voices. It's been a hell of a series of sessions. This time we've been showcasing a range of different approaches towards equality, diversity and inclusion. Started off with Milton Keynes College and their approach to building fairer futures, a new approach in terms of how we embedded, how we are looking to embed, should I say, the equality and diversity inclusion agenda within everything that we do. So it's part of our fabric, the golden thread. And then we went across to Sam Coles over in Birmingham Metropolitan College, who are looking at the various initiatives that they've got going forward on anti-racism, as well as their usualisation of the LGBTQ across their curriculum and their approach and their decision making. And last week we had the fabulous Alicia Soanes, who looked at their student-led initiative, which started last year, which is on an all-year-round approach towards Black history being embedded within the fabric of everything that they do on curriculum and development for their staff over at West Suffolk College. This final session today, we've got Jaspal Dhaliwal, who I had the privilege of meeting a good few months ago now as part of the AOC working group on EDI. It was interesting because it was a different approach in terms of the work that it was doing, and it was working within a really familiar setting for the majority of our educators out there, looking at student attainment and achievement data and how that informs the whole raft of initiatives that are needed, whether it's staff development, whether it's the way we look at data and value data, but also, as I said, creating that fairer, more balanced approach to how do we inspire and engage learners from different backgrounds. And so I've got Jaspal Dhaliwal, who I'm hoping is going to turn his camera on and just say, give us a quick wave. And he's from Westminster Adult Education Service. And we'll do a full intro after a video. He's put together a short presentation just to give you a flavour of the work that they are doing at Westminster Adult Education Services. And as I said, in all the sessions, this series and the previous one, these aren't isolated sessions. The way that we envisage them to be used is to create a conversation to stimulate discussions within anybody that watches these sessions, to ask the questions, what are we doing within our institution to support learners from different backgrounds, from different home settings, or even to how do we improve representation, how do we recruit better, how do we engage with the communities that we serve. And here's Jaspal's session. I'll see you after this.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jaspal Dhaliwal, and I'm the Head of Inclusion, English, Maths and Digital at Westminster Adult Education Service, also known as WAES. At WAES, our vision is to transform our learners' lives through inclusive, inspirational, lifelong learning. Our mission is to provide learning pathways that enable all learners to achieve their career aspirations and fulfill their potential. WAES is a division of the Growth, Planning and Housing Department of Westminster City Council. At Westminster Adult Education Service, an achievement gap has emerged between our African learners and our white British learners. Between 1718 and 1920, that gap widened to 16%. As a result, we set up a group to work on initiatives, firstly, to reduce the gap and then close that gap. To address this, we devised an action plan that consisted of a number of activities that reviewed all the touch points of the learner journey. This included raising awareness about support already offered at the service, including the Discretionary Learner Support Fund and additional learning support. We contacted learners to inform them about this and explained what the support would look like and how they could access it if eligible. In addition, we conducted learner focus groups to better understand the challenges that were facing these learners. From this, we were able to gain a rich and deep understanding of the impact of this on their education. We reviewed current enrichment activities in place and put a plan of action forward that included showcasing Black, minority, ethnic role models, success stories from current and former learners, contacting local authors to come and for guest speaking, all in an attempt to motivate and enthuse learners. We reviewed the take-up of additional learning support, as well as learners who declared a learning difficulty, and considered how ALS can be used to best support these learners. A useful activity to highlight learners at risk was the predicted grade activity. From this, we were able to quickly rate learners and tie this into predicted achievement outcomes. We identified some curriculum-specific challenges which led to alternative approaches being taken within the ESOL department. And all learners who were identified were centrally tracked and monitored with the intention of providing support and supervision so that they would progress and not be at risk, and then that resource reapplied to new learners identified at risk. Other items in review was the curriculum induction for 2021. However, having done a lot of work around attendance and insight, our focus firmly switched to achievement. And with this in mind, we put our attention to the mentoring part of the action plan. The mentoring program was specifically set up for this priority group and used managers to mentor the learners identified at risk. Training for the lead managers followed a 7-point approach. The 7-point approach consisted of a realistic caseload. We were conscious not to overload managers with many learners, as we wanted to ensure quality support was provided to each learner. So we capped the numbers of learners allocated to each mentor to 3. We ensured that mentors were clear on what communication methods could be used to support learners, and the boundaries were understood and met, even more so when dealing with adults during these challenging times. As part of the induction app, learners were provided information about ways to be safe, which included information around safeguarding, prevent, mental health, staying safe online, and in addition to this was the ways to support information, and this was information about ALS financial support, advanced learner loans, childcare, and nursery provision. There was a need to effectively track and monitor the impact of the mentoring of the learners so that progress could be tracked and measured. There needed to be a realistic number of meetings that could take place with the learner to ensure effective mentoring would be meaningful and have impact. These meetings took place face-to-face, using Teams and the Teams chat, and in some instances, just a telephone call. All of this then informed the target setting process to ensure learners had milestones that could be worked towards and distance travelled monitored. The impact of the mentoring was really positive, and from the cohort of learners identified as being at risk, and as a direct result of the mentoring program, 75% achieved their qualification. Learner feedback has been exceptional. The impact has been outstanding, with the gap on achievement reduced to 5.6%. However, our ambition is for no gap, and for the current year we have reviewed our initiatives and have planned interventions from the outset of the academic year. This is a service-wide approach, with curriculum and business support working together to support learners. So for 2021, we put a clear focus on learner voice, which has resulted in the recruitment of digital ambassadors. These are learners who will be supporting their peers with technology. We also have 102 group reps in place, with a number of these trained in safeguarding, including e-safety and equality and diversity. We are in the process of setting up a learner council with recruitment of wider roles to include safeguarding, EDI, well-being and green. With our focus on well-being, we have met with the learners who declared a mental health condition and established what support needs are required. However, a common theme is those learners who do not declare this at enrolment and then being identified later via a tutor referral. So, again, From 2021, we have a whole WAES approach that monitors internally progressed learners to ensure that those who were in receipt of the support in the previous year are enabled and have strategies in place to promote that greater independence. The additional focus is on new enrolments to ensure support is effectively put in place for these learners from the outset. Focus groups continue with planned dates in place, and these take place with the principal and head of service, Aranola. For this year, we have trained 12 mentors and added them to the team, all of whom were business support staff. Further reinforcement that this is a whole organisation approach, with continued support provided to the mentors throughout the process. At present, we have just completed our predicted grades activity and have identified learners at risk and implemented a series of support measures that are in place at present. These include targeted workshops. With Term 2 enrolments taking place in January 2022, all the communication around this initiative will be sent out again to capture new enrolments. We will be assigning caseload to mentors this and next week and cross-reference this list with our learners on our risk register and safeguarding to triangulate the information. We will analyse learners at risk looking at age, ethnicity, gender, and disability, and the continuous tracking of new learners against progressed learners to identify if learners have become enabled. Reporting back. This group reports back to the EDI committee to inform the service-wide action plan for EDI, the executive board, and the governing body. Thank you for your time. And now as we move over to questions.
Welcome back. First of all, thank you, Jaspal, for putting that together. And I'd just like to introduce yourself. And I think we now have Alison as well. You can do a quick introduction, Jaspal, and then I'll move across to you, Alison, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Arv. Yeah, again, my name's Jaspal Dhaliwal. I'm the head of Inclusion, English, Maths and Digital at Westminster Adult Education Service. Alongside that, I've got a number of roles, including safeguarding. I'm part of the EDI committee. More recently, I'm a mental health first aider, and I'm chair of the Preventing the Gap Action Group. I've started my career in education within further education, had a stint at school, then moved over to sixth form, and more recently adult education, which has really been an eye-opener and a wonderful experience in terms of the breadth and depth of the provision that we offer and the impact. So I'd like to hand over to Alison.
Hi everybody. My name's Alison Mugridge. I'm the Assistant Principal Curriculum and Quality. I think probably it says what it is on the tin, but I look after all of the delivery within the Westminster Adult Education Service. So the apprenticeships, the classroom-based learning, any projects we have, ESF projects, etc., all sit within my remit of delivery. And obviously, along comes the outcomes that learners get at the end of their programmes, which is why Jazz nominated to lead this particular aspect of our improvement agenda when we saw there was a gap for our African learners. I mean, you can't see the data now, but if you go back 2 years, it actually widened for a bit, and we were aware of it, and it wasn't. And for me, what was key is it's all very well being aware, but unless you take action, it's just going to become aware of something that you know exists, which is why we did a very specific project that Jazz has just taken you through to take action. First of all, we called it Close the Gap. Then we called it Narrow the Gap, and it's now called Prevent the Gap. So the aim at the end of this year is to have no gap for our learners of this background.
Thank you, Alison. And I think it's a really interesting journey, because I think when we look out into the space to do with achievement and attainment, the language is quite important, because I think it shows the mindset behind it. And I think that going from the closing, the narrowing, and then to preventing the gap, it switches it all around in terms of it's putting the emphasis on not having a gap rather than just mitigating or minimizing any barriers and challenges that people have. This is about removal of barriers, and it's about removal of challenges, and it's about opening up the access in a way that engages with all your learners rather than the majority, which is what I mean, resourcing and everything else kind of pressurizes us into that kind of
Absolutely.
sphere, doesn't it? And we do live in the real world, so I think it's an immense effort that you've put over at WAES, as I'm now calling it, because I'm now one of the family.
The WAES family.
The WAES family, in terms of just that mind shift. So I just want to sort of just take you a step back, if that's okay. And this is almost also pegged on some personal experience as well over the years. The work that you're doing doesn't just happen. For those things to happen, a whole series of other things have to happen first before people start seeing the work that you're doing. So were the systems that were in place, were they adequate enough to supply you with the meaningful evidence? And that could be data, it could be qualitative information, anecdotal, whatever it might be. But were the systems adequate enough? Or did you have to put something in place and develop the systems that you had so that you could capture the right evidence to give you the right picture to do the right work?
Yeah, I think it's at two levels. So at the college or the service level, you could clearly see the data and from a data point of view. So that's where we, first of all, you start looking at the overall outcomes for learners, and then you compare them to White British, etc. And it was quite stark. We could see an overall picture was an issue. What I don't think we had at the time was enough information sitting underneath that. So where are the gaps? Who's got the gaps? Are they everywhere? Are they concentrated? Is it one area? Is it ESOL? Is it? So that was a bit of work that then needed to happen. So we made sure that, and we still make sure that all of our data sets now are all EDI driven. So if anyone's asking for any data for any reason, it always goes through the lens of an EDI. So we should have information on disability, on age, on ethnicity, so that when we analyse it now, we look at it in its entirety, and so can everybody underneath. Therefore, what we were able to identify is what type of provision these learners also had some barriers in, for example, and some of it was our exam-based qualifications. So not all, not exclusively, but quite a lot of them relate to, English, maths, where there are actual exams at the end, our AAT programs where there's an exam in base. So there's something there alongside the mentoring that it wasn't exclusively that, but that was one of the things we saw as a pattern that came out of it. And actually it also enabled people where there wasn't a particular barrier to actually know that actually what they're doing for their learners is fine, but actually if you come across an issue, then you can refer into the programme. That's what I think we took from this, is making sure that all of our data sets at any level had that EDI lens on.
Anything you want to add to that, Jaspal?
Yeah, I think the key to this project as well was from the outset. It wasn't perfection. It was about progress. It was about starting the ball rolling. We started off by looking at attendance, using those data sets, getting the MIS team to run various scripts to, tailor make the reports to what we need. And they've become the norm, as Alison says, as part of every report writing that takes place now. So that was essential to have that. And now we do have that, at a click of a button. So, we've got our finger on the pulse, at all times, and we use that to make sure that from the outset of this academic year that we put intervention in at the earliest opportunity as possible.
Just to give people a sense of scale, what size, so in terms of learner size and cohort size and workforce are you dealing with at WAES?
So learner base in total, not just our African contingents, about 5,000. All adults, obviously, or when I say all adults, there might be a handful, but all adults. In terms of our African contingent, it's our third biggest ethnicity group, and I can't tell you learner headcount because some of it is enrolments we were looking at as well. It was 1,200 enrolments. I've got in my head it's about 600. It was about 13% of our cohort comes from an African background. So it was a significant proportion. It wasn't sometimes when you look at data sets and you go, oh dear, that's 50%. You go, oh, it's two people, so, but it was a significant amount for us
definitely.
To be concerned.
Yeah, and in terms of workforce, because obviously to mobilise the work that you're doing, you have to, I suppose, engage and develop the staff.
I should know this off the top of my head
I'm
because we've just had an
ballpark.
impact. It's about 190 total. That's all staff, including back office staff. And there are a significant number in there of what I think you would probably know as either sessionals or visiting teachers or whatever they're referred to. So the 194 isn't a full FTE. That is just a head count.
Just a couple of things that have come into the chat while the video is playing. So one of the key initiatives that you've got is that mentoring program, Jaspal. If I can come to you first.
Yeah.
So just a little bit. I mean, Sally Alexander, who's from MK College, one of our principals, has asked, could you use alumni or other learners as mentors? How did you get that? Get the body of mentors together, and who did you pick from?
So initially it was cross-service managers in the first round, and as the initiative and as the progress took place, we thought about role models. What do the learners best relate to? Where can they see success? From people that look similar to them, that have been through those same experiences. So we've been showcasing current learners. And in the slides, there was one mention about digital ambassadors. So we've actually got learners in place to support their peers around digital technology, whether that's using Teams, whether that's simple MS products. So we are very much keen to use existing learners, but also more importantly, we've got a number of successful alumni, and it's about really tapping into that and getting them on board. And as I say, it's a work in progress because the action plan was ambitious. We haven't met all of it. We're still, developing certain elements of it. And the alumni aspect is one part which we're hoping to focus in on after Christmas.
Can I just also add to, if you don't mind, with the mentoring, we didn't make it you must mentor. We took it out to our management team saying this is a great opportunity, a great impact you can have with learners, etc. And so volunteers came forward to be part of the programme. And we've done a very similar thing this year. Actually it's doubled in terms of the people wanting to come forward. Now, once you can see a journey of what people have made and impacted in people's life, more people have come forward to take on that role. So that for me is a positive sign that people can see from looking at last year's case studies the impact and now want to be involved more in the project.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think just to add to that, because I think when we first rolled it out, I mean, the whole responsibility of being a mentor wasn't clear. Sharing experience of current mentors that undertook it last academic year and making it clear about what the role and responsibility was, what the time commitment was, what actually they did do on a day-to-day basis. That made the role a lot clearer and a lot more appealing. And I think, making it clear about what it does entail and what it doesn't is crucial to the good take up that we've had this year. And again, it's not been curriculum only, it's business support staff.
Okay. And did you have to sort of like do any CPD or professional development of the people that were going to be mentors in terms of, did you offer them guidance in terms of how to approach it? Because they may not have been mentors, but they could be good mentors, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a couple of people within the pool who had already undertaken some mentoring training, so they had already taken some formal qualifications. But our head of learner development, Annette, she conducted the training for mentors. So that was a half-a-day training where she's run similar programs at previous colleges. So she led on that aspect of it. So there was training put in place really around boundaries, knowing what to do or what not to do, where the responsibility ends, and also about thinking about the internal structure that we've got here, the port of call, who to go to, and really a supportive mechanism and a keep in touch during the whole process, because it was new to a few people, and having that support mechanism for us as mentors is equally as important as supporting the learners.
No, thank you for that. So just stepping back a little bit from that, in terms of one of the initiatives that you've got to actually have that positive impact. Shahid has asked, and I'm going to broaden this question out a little bit. So did you find there was a ripple effect in terms of an impact on the learners' families? And we know that the family support structure is so important to the, I suppose, the engagement levels, but also the progress that any learner makes, no matter who. So even though we're dealing with adults, they still have a support network around them. And especially if they're coming from families where, for example, English isn't their first language. What sort of impacts did you see on the support networks that the learners had in their home environment? Was there anything that you noticed?
Can I'm going to pick it up first while Jazz thinks on that. Quite a lot of our learners, because it was in the COVID situation, were in that position of actually being on their own. So actually that support network wasn't there, which was, I mean, there's one example where someone had got behind with some assignments and then hadn't caught up with the next one and got themselves into a real mess. And actually, because they hadn't got a support network to talk about it at all, actually the mentor became absolutely crucial there in just helping that person through it. That's one I remember very clearly. So quite a lot of our learners were talking about actually being on their own and the impact that was having for them. But I'm sure Jazz can talk about where there were, families involved as well.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of learners in isolation, and the mentoring aspect was excellent because it was a form of communication, someone keeping check on them. And as Alison said, it was very positive. In terms of the ripple effect on families, I mean, one case study, one learner I was mentoring, she couldn't attend her maths classes anymore because she had a new job to go to, and she had 2 young kids. They were in secondary school. She was able to continue with the qualification as we were able to build the work around her work commitment. So that was included posting out resources, giving her, ample opportunity in terms of booking leave to commit to sitting an exam, keeping in touch calls at 7 a.m. in the morning. So the house was still running and, things were ticking over there, but we were supporting her in these out of hours. So, that was a really nice experience.
So I mean, just hitting on that in terms, especially during the pandemic, but I think also moving forward as well, because I think learning in itself, I think, has changed to more of a hybrid anyway, I think, in terms of some of the approaches that we're taking, some of the learners we're taking forward. Did digital poverty play any part in the work that you were doing? And if it did, how did you address the challenges around that?
Do you want me to pick it up?
Do you want to pick that up?
I mean, specifically in terms of device, and then also the issue to do with broadband access.
Yeah. So, I mean, we wasn't able to give everybody a laptop because you can imagine there were quite loads and loads of people. But generally, where we found people, were without devices, quite a lot of people access the provision in that time during their phone, but not ideally. But for people, I'll give you an example on an AAT program. Trying to do it through your phone is nigh impossible. So we were actually able to, issue laptops and connectivity where that was more of an issue. Most people, it was the gadgets and the devices to be able to access the learning rather than the connectivity, because many people, and also when we're in, homeschooling and that situation, they might have had a device, but suddenly it is no longer available to you. And you've got a family of 3, 2 children at school, all trying to access online learning, that the parents were the last ones on the pecking order. So sometimes there were those situations as well, but we were able to, as much as possible, deploy laptops. And I mean, these weren't all in this category, but there was way over 100 that we deployed out to people where we knew that they couldn't get by on a phone with their particular device.
Yeah, I mean, that was a challenge. The obvious one there described, working on your phone, not ideal. Where it was possible, we were able to access some of our learning centre as well. Learners were able to come on site and access their learning through our facilities here. And, as Alison described, a lot of our learners are local. It's busy in the households with children, and, that respite coming out of the home and coming into a different environment to engage in learning was crucial.
Thank you. So again, just broaden that out in terms of, obviously you have the home situations, which may or may not have an impact on the adult learners that you have. But in terms of the workforce and in terms of the delivery teams and the people that make the magic happen within WAES, what was the impact in terms of their personal development, or their professional development, should I say, within the workplace? Was there work that you had to do around that to support the work that you're doing? So like one of the things that you said was that you're ensuring that the EDI lens is on all reporting, for example. Now, that doesn't just happen when you just ask for that to happen, but also in terms of the way that people are delivering, being culturally aware, all those different things. Did you find that staff were already equipped to be able to deal with those demands for them to take it to the next level, or did you have to do work around that too?
I mean, I think there was a lot of work to do around that, because I think we've got good mechanisms in terms of capturing learner voice and our staff understanding like what our learners do in terms of around teaching, learning and assessment. But this work led us to sort of really think about, what learners go through, and we also considered about what is anti-racism, are those issues part of their current dialogue. So what we actually done is we wanted to raise awareness of our staff about our focused groups and how their everyday lives, what does that feel like for them? So there was some work undertaken by Suki Desi from Havant and South Downs College around racial microaggressions. So we conducted some focus groups and explored that, and just to get a feel of what our learners went through. And from that, we were able to get some feedback around our learners' everyday experiences, not only when they're at WAES, but outside WAES, their interactions. And we used that to inform an extended SMT meeting, which we underpinned by just giving out some homework, which the first one was an article by Maxine Room about could education have saved George Floyd? And the second point was the Black Further Education Leadership Group about the 10-point plan. So these elements here were brought in to really raise awareness about challenges within the sector, really with the focus of making sure that everyone feels a sense of belonging. And so that subsequently led us to focus on key themes that stemmed from that. And one of them was the mentoring. One of them was Black history all year round, which was covered last week. And, as discussed in the presentation, the touch points of the learner journey. So all of that, we had a real big push and drive to make sure that that awareness was raised amongst all staff.
Just to add to that, we also managers had unconscious bias training as part of the recruitment process, but we also then rolled that out to all staff again, we didn't go down at this is compulsory, you must do, but we went down at this is available, it would be useful as part of the momentum, the project building momentum, people buying into the project and wanting to get involved rather than being told they had to be involved. And that's been very successful in terms of people just getting involved and actually going through that process to understand more and to find out where they're coming from and their own viewpoints, etc.
No, definitely. I think definitely that the engagement levels are far higher, I think, when people buy into the process and they choose to buy into the process. I think you're absolutely right from the rather than mandating. Has there been anything that you have had to mandate, though, in terms of the approach?
I mean, filling out forms, yes, sort of thing, but that's more of a compliance thing right across the board. So when you're asking people to do things like we need our predicted results in, that's a mandatory thing. All tutors must do this. The fact we're just looking at it through an EDI lens is insignificant. That's just a job that needs to be done. So that's the type of things we were doing in terms of that. And with teams, just making them aware. So, asking teams, if AAT, for example, has got a significant proportion of Africa, then actually have that dialogue in your team. It's not, I don't want the manager fighting the cause, actually, so they're the types of processes where I'd say they were more mandated. We didn't go in heavy with any mandatory training other than what I call the pre-employment check stuff we do, which is E&D general training. No. But it was more about compliance to process and making sure people were doing it because they needed to do it. And then we were able to feed back to them. And then it was a bit more, I understand why I did it now. It wasn't because I just want to sit and navel gaze everybody's data. It was actually it's telling you what support's needed.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, and I think it's just that, like you said, there's that whole mindset on how you approach this work. Sometimes does dictate how people engage with you with this work as well. So I think that's an important point to note in terms of how you deliver these initiatives and how you deliver the approach that you want.
I was just going to say, I think if you'd have asked anyone in our organisation 2 years ago, was there any significant gaps in our achievement, you'd have got a very what's the word? Probably a very different story to what you're hearing now. People would have gone, I'm not sure. Someone might have heard down the corridor. Someone might have thought, actually, I'm pretty sure someone mentioned it at some point. I think if you came back now and said, have you had significant achievement gaps? I'd be very surprised if someone didn't know. We might have the odd part-time tutor that teaches 3 hours on a Wednesday evening, basket weaving or ceramics or something, but certainly not, our mainstream staff. I'd be very surprised if nobody was aware, because it has been what I call mainstreamed now. The discussions, the EDI lens, it's not just done once a year, it's at regular key points.
I'm going to steal a word from Sam at BMA in terms of you've usualised your approach to this. And
Usualised.
So so it's now embedded within the processes that you've got. So now it becomes part of people's role to do the work, I suppose, from that point of view. In terms of, just want to highlight just a couple of things just while I'm looking through the questions that I've got at my end. Teresa Carroll from the Education Training Foundation has posted a couple of links to some really good stuff as well, in terms of, first of all, she's done a call out to you, Jaspal, in terms of she'd love to feature and showcase the work that you're doing at WAES on their Inclusive FE webpage. But also there's a Future Learn course, which to do with advancing equity in further education. So another really good link there to have a look there, and I'll share that with everybody after the event as well. So you've spoken about some of those in terms of not necessarily unexpected, but things that have come out of the discussions and creating platforms for people to be able to speak. Shahid has said, were there any unexpected surprises, so beyond what you've spoken about today, that you may want to take forward that you haven't taken forward yet? So unexpected surprises. So I don't know whether that's
I think it's just a greater awareness. We had a conversation with a learner the other day, and it's about cultural sensitivities. She does makeup. The makeup kit that she received didn't reflect what she thought reflects her skin color, and it's about empowering our teaching staff to know how to handle those conversations and where to go. So for us, as an organization, we're a lot more confident. There's a lot more people to go to, and there's a lot more literature that we're aware of, one being the one you created on your website, about how to actually use language to have those tough conversations. So it's just about that openness and again sharing it across the sector, sharing it across colleagues, learning from each other.
No, absolutely. So just a question to both of you, in terms of, I know it's been posed to Jazz, but I'm going to open it to both of you. So Sally's asked, what do you think's had the most impact of all the things that you've done so far? And I know it's a collection, and I know that there's a lot of overlap, but if there's one thing that you think actually that one thing that we did seems to have had the most impact because for whatever reason.
I think for me, and I'll let Jez speak for himself, it might be different. Having gone through the whole process and listened to all of the information, the mentoring, because it's when you get the feedback that there was a learner that was about to walk away because they were so overwhelmed. And I mean, we were in extreme circumstances, COVID lockdown, so this isn't about what the tutor wasn't doing, but because they'd got themselves in quite, they were about to leave, and actually someone just taking some time with them to say, hang on, just let's chill, let's look at what you need to do, let's help you, and get some normality back into how they were viewing things, for them to walk away and achieved well and actually have progressed on to the next level. For me, they wouldn't have done that. Any data in the world wouldn't have made that difference. So that's why, for me, I think the mentoring and listening to what is each individual's specific issue that they're dealing with at that time, whether it's, being given makeup for probably, I'm going to suggest Caucasian skin, not black skin, and therefore don't know what to do and get it, or dealing with someone that's just overwhelmed with work. When you can turn that around to an achievement, to a success, to a progression, to getting on with their lives, that's for me the biggest impact. I'll let Jazz speak if his is different or the same.
Yeah, I mean, to follow on from that, I think the whole thing about enabling learners is the key here, because we support them. We help them along. We know there's challenges. We put that resource in place, but also we take it away, empower them so they become empowered, and they move forward and they do progress, and that's the biggest impact there. Make it, enabling them, letting them move on. Problem solving the challenges they have, identifying clear strategies, support processes that they can access that are in place here, and really just showing them the pathways in order for them to achieve and how to get to that. That's really been the biggest thing for me. The hands-on stuff.
Definitely. In terms of the things that you've done and the things that you plan to do in your action plan and how you've moved those things forward, are there things in that were on a draft action plan somewhere that you haven't been able to achieve, or you've chosen not to do, or you decided not to do and move forward with? And what are the reasons behind those?
I think one of the things which, from the original action plan, which we haven't been able to fully implement, is the Black History throughout the year. While we gave it a good push in the month, but that wasn't our ambition. It was to continue that. So we've decided, we met up this week actually, because that's a focus for us come January. We know a couple of college institutions that have done it well. We're keen to talk to local authors and artists to come in, and also the alumni. But really, it's about representing role models that reflect the learner cohort, so they can see people like themselves who have done well and progressed. And that's for me, that's my next big thing to work with Annette, our head of learner services.
Okay, and from your point of view, Alison, anything that was on a list that
I think that's probably the one. And again, I think the reason we didn't get the traction was, this time last year we were just going into tier 4. So all the great plans for a monthly spotlight, etc., suddenly you're back into, oh my goodness, we're all going to be working at home again. So, and then when we came back, it was all about getting back on site again. So I think, it was circumstance rather than oh dear, this is too difficult. I think it's probably one of the easier ones we can get back on track. We've got a number of successful learners, so there's no reason why we shouldn't get that traction quite quickly back up and running. But yeah, I think exactly, it was just one of those things that fell over at the sort of stumbling blocks.
No, absolutely, and I think understandably so as well, because I think there are so many challenges posed, sometimes with equal priority, to be fair, and you have to choose. In terms of moving forward, so you've spoken about one of the things that you really want to reignite and take forward and moving forward. So what's next, apart from embedding what you've got now? How do you take it up that next level? So if there is a level.
I mean, for me, I'd very much like to get to the point where we've got employers and business mentors as well, especially for some of our learners that we turn around, we turn a pivotal point, and actually they can then get that mentoring to go and be successful in the world of business, whatever that business involves. I think that would be a really, really useful. I mean, I've seen mentors in industry coming in, and they add a different dimension to the conversation. So I'd really like to see if we can get some traction, even if not a huge amount this year, but as part of that journey, see if we can involve some of that, so that when somebody's actually, what I call mentoring to get back on track, has fulfilled itself, maybe we can do mentoring which is more proactively about what's next for you in work, type of a mentoring, which I think could be very powerful. Turning something that could have been a complete disaster for an individual into an actual extremely positive, and actually moving, next steps. So that's what I'd like to see. I haven't talked to Jazz about that, actually, by the way. I've just landed that one with him. But
And
I'm sure
I may
Jazz...
be able to help you with that as well, because there are organisations that offer that free in terms of to the learners. I think we've spoken to one organisation called, I think they're called Freestar, who offer that, and that is people from various sectors who offer mentoring to young adults. I think they've got a particular age bracket, but I think some of your learners will fall within that, so that might be an option as well.
Brilliant.
Sort of like a lower effort, high impact approach on that one. But it's definitely something that I think all of us can work together on in terms of how do we pull together resources and get mentors to improve employability, because ultimately that's what it's about, I suppose. Is to get people into society where they feel they can contribute. Jas?
Yeah, I think the whole employability piece is crucial, and it's about that exposure. You know, we work in the Westminster. You know, we've got big buildings here, but you know, do some of our learners even think that one day they could walk through those doors? You know, it's about those experiences and how we work with our stakeholders to actually, you know, use them as a resource so that they can inspire our learners. You know, about the project, it's about making it better. It's about making it more efficient. So again, considering all the touch points from course inquiry to, you know, to interview to enrollment, you know, making sure everything is there from the outset, and any flags are, you know, are raised there. So support, supervision, intervention can be put in place again to prevent the gap. So you start it from the outset, so there is nothing at the end.
No, absolutely. So just as I just start wrapping up, and I'm just conscious of the time, I'm going to give you time to think, both of you, just to think in terms of a golden nugget that you want to give any of the listeners in terms of one piece of advice or a couple of pieces of advice, people that are looking to start along this journey that you started a few years ago, in terms of getting to the point where you're preventing the gap rather than just narrowing it or closing it. We are now looking at putting together our next series, which hopefully should be in spring of next year. Yet to decide on an exact focus, but it's going to be more of showcasing some of the work that we're involved in, other organisations, bringing in some of our community and industry partners as well. So look at the angle of what the employability skills that they're looking for, and what their role is to make sure that the FE sector is providing enough support so that our learners can move forward into those sectors, especially those underrepresented sectors within the digital IT, engineering. I could go on to list whether it's a gender, whether it's ethnicity, but also the whole accessibility for our learners that have a disability. How do they access the workplace, and how do we utilise all of these people that would come through our doors in the FE sector within the sectors that they want to work in and thrive in? So it's that joined up approach. So over to the golden nugget stage. Who shall I start? I'm going to start with you, Alison, and I'm going to give the final word to Jazz, if that's all right. So Alison,
absolutely fine by me. I think my golden nugget would be when you know, I think for me, when I saw the gap, my immediate thing is, oh, this needs fixing immediately, etc. But I would say, see it as a journey. Whatever you're trying to accomplish and whatever you're trying to achieve, see it as a journey you're going on, as opposed to trying to immediately fix something that you think, because you can see something might not be working. So that for me has been one of the things, because it hasn't been an overnight quick win, and we've had things like, oh dear, that hasn't worked, and we haven't had this, and we've moved on. So see things as the journey, and it will continue to be one, even when we prevent the gap. There's no point going, well, we've done that and putting our feet up. It will be what's next.
Really valuable piece of advice there. Over to you, Jas.
I think similar, progress over perfection. It's not going to start off perfect. You learn as you go along, but the most important thing is take action, do something, because if we don't do something, those learners suffer. Every day, every week, every month, those learners are suffering. So there's no point, there's no perfect model to start off with, but a start's got to be made.
I think that's a perfect piece of advice perfect piece of advice. And I think that's a thread that's been coming through in all of our sessions, in terms of the work can seem quite daunting in terms of the scope of it, the size of it, the impact of doing something and not doing something, but also I think from an educator's point of view and an institution's point of view, it's quite a daunting journey to make yourself vulnerable to this, because when you start looking at the data, whether it's to do with the learners or whether it's to do with the workforce and the progress from various sector groups of people within our organisations, you are leaving yourself open, because you are open to being criticised in terms of the gaps that you have. But I think the most important thing, like you said, Jas, and you've also echoed, Alison, is the fact that is to start that journey, because every day, like you say, Jas, that we don't do something, every week we don't do something, the suffering doesn't stop, that aspect doesn't stop. The aspirations are the things that die as well, in terms of that whole aspect about the mindset that we need within our learners, but also within our workforce to drive this work forward. So thank you so much. Nudging good behaviour, I think, is another way of doing the work that we do. Like you're saying, not going down that mandatory route, but showcasing the impact. And I think that's the key part, and that's what really drove me to do this particular series, is that I think people need to see not just the whys behind the work, but actually the impact when you do decide to pull that thread and start wherever you start. So thank you again, Alison, for your time.
No worries.
I know how long the days can be, and thank you, Jas, for putting together that presentation. As I said, collaboration. I'm hoping that if people come my way, I'll direct them over to you so that you can share what you're doing. If there are any resources that you do want to share, specifically to do with the mentoring, I think that's something that I think is something that people can adopt within their spaces. That would be quite good. So if you've got anything that you can share, that you're willing to share, you're happy to share, that people can utilise, I'm happy to send that out to anybody that asks for it on your behalf as well. So thank you again, and thank you to all the people that have joined us today. Lots of people have said thank you, really good work at WAES, and I'm really, really glad that we connected.
Lovely.
Thanks, Arv.
Lovely to meet everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.